All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Corner at Choose Adventure Media. My name is Zach, and in tonight's episode, I'll be recapping the Oregon-Iowa game. It was a very exciting game tonight, and if you've been tuning into any of my earlier live streams, sorry about the audio issues. I think I should have it fixed by now. So let's jump right into it. Obviously, it's a very exciting game. I feel like ever since I woke up this morning, the Ducks faced a tremendous amount of adversity from Dakorien Moore being out, Alex Harkey being out, Kenyon Sadiq being out, and Gary Bryant Jr. going out early in the game. And obviously everyone knew that it was already going to be a tough game, tough place to play. And Iowa's an extremely tough team to play, especially at home. They're extremely well coached. They're extremely talented. So I think the Ducks deserve an immense amount of credit, and I don't know if they're going to get it. Especially given all of the negative press that's been out about the Ducks over the last 2 weeks, during the bye week and then during this week, is I feel like they've been facing a lot of criticism for a team that's only lost to the number 2 team in the country. And I mean, this is very SEC-esque. So Oregon is getting treated now like a serious contender under a microscope. But I think this win proves that this team is absolutely worth being in that top tier of teams. They're not in the second tier. They're not with, the Texases. They're not with Oklahoma. Like, they are absolutely in the same category as Ohio State and Indiana. And I think this game's going to go a long way to proving that Oregon is one of the best teams in the country, despite, that Penn State win not looking as good. We'll tell that to Indiana today, who almost lost. The game would have been 36 seconds shorter. So this team's just so tough, so young, so smart. And, even Oregon fans over the last couple of weeks, the Oregon Ducks were 7-1. And over the last couple of weeks, I've been reading the subreddit, and people have been saying, this team's too young. They can't do anything. Let's pack it up. It was a good season, deuces. And that's just so unfair. Like, the season is so long. It's starting now the last weekend in August or first weekend of September, and it goes through the end of January. And people are saying that by the middle of October, the season's over. Like, come on. The season is so long. This team has so much talent. And I think Dante Moore proved that. And I think Will Stein also showed an immense amount of growth over the last 2 weeks. In my last couple of live streams, I've been saying Dante Moore hasn't had that look in his eye since the Penn State game. Like, the Penn State game, running into the stadium, he had this look in his eye of being locked in and being focused and being ready to go. And Will Stein, I have criticized him in my last couple of live streams over his game plan and the lack of a definitive game plan. Failure to set things up for the second half, or failure to use one concept to set up a different concept, and also a failure of running a play until a team shows that they can stop that play. And Will Stein did that today. Ultimately, Iowa never was able to stop the run up the middle. Huge credit to the Oregon offensive line, who again has been another heavily criticized group. And even though most of that criticism has been on the pass blocking, they were elite today. Like, they were phenomenal today, even with a backup. Huge shout out to Janoris Wilson, I believe is his name, who stepped in for Alex Harkey at right tackle. Made some huge plays. So this team has fought through so much adversity, not just today, not just for the 4 hours at Kinnick Stadium today. It's really been throughout the season since that loss to Indiana. Even whenever the Ducks beat Penn State, there was even a little bit of like, okay, you went double overtime, whoop-de-doo. Like, it's a tough place to play. Ask Indiana, and Indiana didn't even have to play that night. They played there at noon kickoff. Playing a team that's 3-5 and has nothing to play for. The coach is fired. Like, and Indiana struggled to get out of Beaver Stadium with a win. So I think that this win will finally start to turn the public perception of Oregon, and they definitely deserve it. Oregon doesn't deserve to be. They haven't done anything to put themselves in the second tier team. Yes, they struggled against Wisconsin. Yes, they won in double overtime to Penn State, who ended up not being the team that everyone thought they were. And okay, they have the toughest schedule in the world, but they've beat who's in front of them except for Indiana, who's the number 2 and most likely the number 1 ranked team in the country. And they just went to Kinnick Stadium in ugly conditions, way uglier than when Indiana was there. And they gutted out a tough win. And that's the only way to describe it. And it just takes guts. Like, I'm going to quote Dallas Sweeney here. Bring your own guts. Of, you give up a touchdown late, and I don't think that's on the defense, really. They played a phenomenal game all game, and I think the offense should be obliged to put more than 16 points a game, so I'm not putting this on the defense at all. the defense struggled a little bit in coverage, and by in coverage I mean that one play on the final drive, the safeties cheated down, but it was cover 2. I mean, middle field should have been open, and then everyone knows that DB2, cornerback 2, has been a little bit of a weakness for this Ducks team this entire season. They've been trying out Theron Johnson, they've been trying out, Jaden Kennedy a little bit, they've been trying out Ife Obadegwu, and Brendan Finney Jr. is definitively cornerback 1, and I really hope he finally starts to get some credit for being an All-American corner. Like, he is absolutely having a Derek Stingley Jr. type year, in 2019-2020 Derek Stingley type year. He's elite in pass coverage, and today he came up with a huge forced fumble. That saved the game right there. I mean, if I was in the red zone and he forced a fumble, like, he's elite in pass coverage, and now he's showing that he's an elite run defender and can force fumbles. Like, he deserves way more credit than he's getting. I'm so tired of seeing all these lists of like most talented true freshmen, and it's Dakorien Moore. Granted, he's very talented, and then you'll see the quarterback from Maryland up there. You'll see Bo Jackson from Ohio State. You'll see usually one of the Ducks running backs, DR Hill or Davison, and Brandon Finney Jr. is never on this list. And that's so frustrating because I really think Brandon Finney Jr. isn't only a freshman All-American. He's absolutely playing at an All-American type level at the cornerback position. So I think there's going to be a lot of credit that understandably goes to the defensive tackles as well for this game. But I think Matayo Uiagalelei and Tatum Tuioti deserve an immense amount of credit. And Matayo didn't have the greatest statistical game. He only had 2 tackles and half a tackle for loss. And Tatum Tuioti had a great game statistically, 9 tackles, including 1 sack and 1 tackle for loss. But those guys really forced every single run back inside. And that was really the key to stopping Iowa's run offense today. Is Iowa's a great team at running the ball. And the key was to force those outside runs back inside towards the masses, towards where most of the players are, which is in the middle of the field. And I saw run after run after run of forcing those runs back inside. And that's what really made the game plan for Oregon work. And so while, Bear Alexander had 3 tackles, Amari Washington had 3 tackles, Terrence Green had 2 tackles, and Matayo Uiagalelei only had 2, he was so key on forcing all of those runs back inside. Jerry Mixon had 13 tackles. Again, all of that is Matayo and Tatum forcing those runs back inside. Bryce Betcher, 8 tackles, Dylan Thieneman, 8 tackles, Aaron Flowers, 4 tackles. So all of those tackles were generated by having elite edge presences and forcing those runs back inside towards the linebackers, towards those tackles. I think Noah Langton, he deserves an immense amount of credit, and even the stats don't really tell the whole story. And his stats were phenomenal: 17 carries, 118 yards, average 6.9, and a long rush of 27 yards. That's a phenomenal statistical day. But he carried this game. I was so nervous when we were running Whittington over and over and over again against a physical team like Iowa. I was so scared that Whittington was going to go down. We saw with Tatum, we saw with other guys, like, you're going to get banged up against this Iowa team. And he just didn't quit. Even in the fourth quarter, I thought he was going to be running out of gas. He didn't quit. And so while the running back room has shrunk, obviously in the first couple of weeks, we saw 5, 6, 7, elite running backs on the field. And now we're down to, they only played 3 today. Noah Whittington played phenomenally well. And then Jordan Davis and DR Hill, I think, also showed that they are some of the best freshmen in the country. DR Hill isn't just a lightning back, Like, he's not just quick and have little. He can break a tackle. He can truck a guy into the end zone. Jordan Davison has proved that he's not just thunder. He's not just power. He has will. He has great vision. He has great patience at running back position. So this is a huge win in going towards the Ducks' ultimate long-term goals. And I really think the Ducks can be last year's Ohio State. All throughout the year, everyone knew Ohio State wasn't playing up to their potential. Everyone knew Ohio State was a better team than what they looked like against Oregon earlier on in the year, what they looked like against Michigan, and whether it was Chip Kelly, whether it was not getting Jeremiah Smith ball enough, whether Will Howard being a little inconsistent. There were so many factors that were keeping that team from playing up to their potential, even after having a great year, 10-2 regular season. And I really think this Oregon team can be that. Everyone knows that this team is elite and has talent. It's just consistency. Like, Dante Moore showed that today. And it's good to see Dante Moore. Well, he was struggling a little bit in the opening of the game, in the beginning game. That throw to Malik Benson was one of the best throws I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, that throw was open, and he threw that with anticipation, and it's the exact time. If you're going to throw that, that's the exact timing it has to be, and that's the exact location it has to be for that to be open. So Dante Moore is proving that he has elite traits, and later on in this live stream, I'll talk about what that means for his NFL projection and whether I think he'll be going to the NFL or not, because that's been as the year goes on, that's a really hotly talked about topic. But I think Dante Moore deserves a lot of credit. He hung in there today. Like, he hung the battle And that is something that I feel like he struggled with a little bit this year, of when he's on, and when he's off, he's off. And today, like, he showed the memory of a goldfish and the best way possible of not letting bad plays affect him. You know, he ripped that interception to the end zone. I mean, if there's a difference between that and the catch, they don't let him through it at the same time. You know, early on in the game, I think it was second down or third down, and throwing that ball is pretty impressive coverage. It was there. The ball had to be perfect. And against a team like Iowa, I don't necessarily like that throw. Especially against, no offense to Perry, no offense to a fifth-string wide receiver. I think more play phenomenally. His stats are going to show at 13 of 21 for 112 yards and 1 interception. He was instrumental to this game. Obviously, his rushing yards will reflect that a little bit more. 4 rushes for 46 yards and 11.5 yards per carry. And I mean, he was fighting for the injury. Clearly, something got tweaked on that 49-yard rush. Ankle, hamstring, quad, knee, something like that. Dan Lanning said that ultimately he was fine. Sure. I don't think it'll affect him long term, but something was clearly tweaked on that play. So huge grinded out win by the Ducks. I mean, they ran the ball and they averaged the Ducks averaged 7.3 yards per carry against one of the top 10 rushing defenses in all of college football. Let me say that again. 7.3 yards per carry against one of the top 10 rush defenses in all of college football. Like, for the game. Look, I know everyone knows that Oregon's offensive line is elite at rushing the ball and it's in pass they've been struggling, but still, to do that against a team that's as well coached as Iowa. So coming into this game, Iowa was the 10th ranked rush defense in the country, only allowing 83.9 yards per game and 2.64 yards per rush. 2.64 yards per rush, and what they gave up 7.3, right? 7.3 divided by 2.4, I said? 2.64. So Oregon ran for almost 3 times the yards per carry that Iowa's getting up through 8 games this year. Like, that's not just on the offensive line. That's great play design by Wilson. I know I've been extremely critical of him. That's great run blocking, especially by backup right tackle and and that's great vision by Dante Moore on those design quarterback keepers. Great vision by Noah Whittington and just outright physicality. And great vision by 2 true freshmen in Jordan Davis and D.R. Hill Jr. So I'm so proud of this team. And before I started this YouTube channel, I was always weirded out into that. It's like, you're a fan, you're a man. Like, I don't really understand it, but I'm so impressed by this team. Also, like Sexton, who a lot of people want to be benched, you know, and they're trying out kickers, and Sexton went 3 for 3 in an incredibly difficult condition. Wet round. We saw that happen to Iowa team, you know, on the 58 yards that they made, the hold was bobble, you know, snapping over the head, like, all this. Adam Sexton went 3 for 3, you know, and saved made the game, really. I mean, the Ducks only scored 1 touchdown. So, as always, let me know who you guys thought. I'm sorry. Or most disappointed by. I hear from and chat some comments. I think I'll use this one to go my sticker. Second. Obviously, no LinkedIn. That one's in. I think Brandon Jr. I'll just deserve a sticker because the forced fumble. That was huge. That was a perfect hit. I don't know if that's going to get talked enough because of, you know, the kick and the throw down. So you want that stride. Brandon Jr. saved the game with that forced fumble. And let's see, a third helmet sticker. Either one, Bear Alexander or Taylor. I guess Gene just gave it to the end of the line. In reality, they were the best on the field today for Iowa or Oregon. So I'm probably going to go Taylor because he got made up. He's so like. The impact that he has on pass play when he doesn't get to the quarterback can't be understated. Like, there was the one naked bootleg, and Mark Gronowski underthrew a pass because he had to get over Taylor out in his raised arms. And it's like, a defensive end basically just broke a pass play. Like, it just, Taylor is so underrated. And I know I've talked about this before. I think Taylor probably projects the best potential. I should be right draft board. I wouldn't be surprised if he's second or third rounder. You know, he doesn't have the measurables that maybe off the screen, which may hold him back later rounds. I really think he's a second round talent at the very least. Depending if you want to go to the type outside linebacker, rush the ball, he can drop coverage. Obviously, they were fine with him playing quarterback spy on that last touchdown play by Gronowski at the end. And I think that's on him. I love that he was quarterback guy. But, you know, the fact that he didn't make the play was on him. It was on, you know, running. It was a freak accident of running into Matayo Uiagalelei. I really think that this is a great win for Oregon moving forward. And I think, and the announcer said it, I think that this helps them in their playoff push. So, Indiana struggled a little bit against Penn State today. But I think overall, it seems like public perception is going to be that's helping them, and they can grit out wins and Fernando Mendoza's Heisman moment and all that. So Indiana may actually go up to number 1, which obviously would be good for Oregon because then they're only losing to the number 1 team in the country. This was a huge win because clearly the playoff committee valued Iowa more than the AP poll did. Iowa was unranked in the AP poll, but ranked number 20 in the playoff poll. And so Oregon now has a top 25 win. And as we go down the stretch, there's more opportunities. I believe Washington won today, and they were ranked in the top 25, and USC should still be ranked in the top 25 after their win over Northwestern. Oh, Washington lost. I take that back. But Washington lost to Wisconsin. So in a way, the Wisconsin win looks a little bit better, and then still, if Oregon wins at Husky Stadium, I think that's going to be a great win. So I've said this before and I still stand by it. I don't think Oregon has to win out to make the college football playoff. I think they can afford, especially after they win today, I think they can afford to lose to either USC or Washington. Obviously, it's better all around if they, win those. And I think if they win out, I think they'll be hosting a playoff game in the first round. But if they lose, they'll most likely have to go on the road in one of those first playoff games. But this was a huge win. If you're looking at strictly, by Vegas or by ESPN's FPI predictions, today was the hardest game left on Oregon's schedule. Knock on wood. Hopefully the game against Minnesota at home on Friday is going to be a little bit easier. And then they get USC at home, which is really nice. And then probably... I think what USC is probably the best team left on Oregon's schedule. And then obviously Washington, very talented team. And they have to go on the road to Husky Stadium to play that one. So that'll be a tough game. But I think the Oregon should go up in the playoff rankings. Let me pull up the playoff rankings real quick. That's not right. They didn't have them at 6. The committee had them at 9. Okay. So, Ohio State won today. Indiana won, but that game may vault Indiana up to number 2. In any case, Ohio State, Indiana will still be 1-2. Texas A&M will most likely still be 3. Alabama's playing LSU tonight. Assume they win, they'll still be 4. And then BYU lost, so I'm assuming Oregon is at least going to jump up to 8, if not 7. It depends on... No, I mean, Ole Miss isn't going to drop. So Oregon may only go up to 8, but I think this one's going to go a long way towards public perception of Oregon, because now this is a quality win. And a lot of people were saying that Oregon's best win up to this point was against Northwestern at Northwestern. I don't know if I agree with that, and I hope that Indiana's win today over Penn State proves that at Penn State is still a quality win. By the way, it's good to see everyone. Love to hear in the chat what you guys think this means for Oregon moving forward in their playoff race. What do you think it means for, what were you most impressed by? What were you most disappointed in? Would love to hear from you guys in the chat. Any questions you guys have about anything Oregon Ducks related, college football related, would love to hear from you guys. So... while this may only propel Oregon up to number 8 in this upcoming playoff rankings, I think it's going to go a long way towards overall public perception. And I think Oregon, after losing to Indiana and struggling against Wisconsin, I think Oregon had dropped into a second tier. I think people were looking at Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, and Alabama as one tier. And then Georgia, Ole Miss, before today, BYU, Texas Tech, Oregon, in the second tier, and then Notre Dame, Texas, Oklahoma in another tier of a third tier, as like teams that are barely holding on and most likely don't deserve to make the playoff. But I think this should move Oregon back up into fringe tier 1 territory. Obviously, in my opinion, I think Oregon's resume is a lot more impressive than Ole Miss's so far. I think Ole Miss is very talented, but in my opinion, I think they should be in that second tier with BYU, Texas Tech, BYU and Texas Tech, and Georgia. I really think Oregon is an elite team. They just haven't been playing consistently, and I think that's the biggest hurdle that they have to jump over. And today they proved that, if they're off on one day without 3 of their best offensive players. So Oregon's faced a lot of unfair and undue negative public perception. And I know I've said it multiple times. I really think this is a great win and is going to turn around public perception of Oregon. Now I want to talk about Dante Moore. It's been really hotly debated. Every NFL mock draft that comes out has him going in the top 10, or I saw one today that had him at 19 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm buying the Kool-Aid. Todd McShay is saying that Dante Moore is most likely coming back. I really think Dante Moore will be coming back for another year. I think when it gets down to it, come January, February, I don't think Dante Moore is going to be looked at as a lock first round pick in this year's draft because of his inconsistency issues. I think what we've seen with guys like Anthony Richardson, which Dante Moore is already a way better quarterback than Anthony Richardson ever was, but I think NFL teams are going to want to see consistency a little bit more than what we've seen. From a guy like, for example, first round pick Kenny Pickett. Like, I think NFL teams are going to want to see consistency at the quarterback position before they invest a first round pick in them. So I really think Dante Moore has a great chance of coming back to Oregon. Just due to his inconsistencies. He has elite talent. Like, he by far has way more arm talent than Fernando Mendoza has. Put me on record for that. It's just consistency with that arm talent. Fernando Mendoza couldn't make that pass to Malik Benson today. He made great throws at the end of the Penn State game. Like, he threw a ridiculous pass down the sideline to get them inside the 10. Like, Fernando Mendoza has a tremendous amount of arm talent. He's very smart. He plays with great anticipation. Dante Moore has a stronger arm. When Dante Moore's accurate, he can be more accurate than Fernando Mendoza, and Dante can play with the same level of anticipation that that Fernando Mendoza plays with. Look at the Malik Benson throw. I also think Dante Moore is a little bit more mobile than Fernando Mendoza. He's been getting a little banged up, which is a little concerning. Like we saw, obviously, in the Wisconsin game, he broke his nose or had a bloody nose and ended up not playing the rest of the game. Today, he clearly, started limping a little bit, whether that's a quad, whether that's a knee, whether that's a hamstring, ankle, calf, Achilles, whatever. I don't think that's long-term. And then I believe it was the Northwestern game? I think it was late in the first half. He scrambled and he took a tough hit. And he was clearly a little rattled for the rest of the game. So if you want to make that argument that Fernando Mendoza hasn't been getting, a little bruised up here and there, fine. But Dante Moore was huge on that 49-yard rush and was, injured for half of that rush. So Dante Moore has more wiggle than Fernando Mendoza does, stronger arm, can be more accurate, and plays with just as much anticipation. It's really just going to be about, I think Fernando Mendoza has a little bit better football IQ. But he also has way more experience. He was a starter at Cal. And this is still only Dante Moore's 11th, 12th start at the college level. So I think, again, I really think that Dante Moore is going to stay for another year, get more experience under his belt, prove that he can play with more consistency. And while he still may end up being a top 20 NFL draft pick if he goes into this year's draft, or definitely a first rounder, I think what we're seeing with guys like Arch is are you really ready for the next level? Like, the NFL can break you. Like, we've seen that with Anthony Richardson. The NFL, it's not like going to college early so then you can, get into the system and, get your body right. And, you learn better in the NFL? No, like the NFL can break you, but it can also make you. But I really think Dante Moore, and I'm not just saying this as a selfish Ducks fan, I really think Dante Moore would really benefit from another year at Oregon, get more experience, get more football IQ. You know, he showed a tremendous amount of growth today. And at the end of the Indiana game, I really criticized Will Stein for his play calling, his play design, and also Dante Moore's ability to throw against zone. And Iowa, also a zone-heavy team, and I was pretty concerned about that coming into this game, as Iowa runs a lot of zone coverage. And so it takes different routes and different route combinations to beat zone coverage than it does man coverage. And what you see a lot of times in college is one side of the field will be zone beaters, and then one side of the field will be man coverage beaters. So a quarterback walks up to the line of scrimmage, he reads it, he says, okay, I think this is covered to zone. I'm going to go to my left side because those are my zone beaters. That's just an example of you know, what a quarterback in college is looking at. And I felt like in the Indiana game, Will Stein wasn't giving Dante Moore enough zone beaters. He was giving him a lot of routes that were great against man coverage, but not zone coverage. And we saw that with Dakorien Moore didn't have his best game against Indiana. And Dakorien Moore, a lot of his big explosive plays are off man coverage because he's so quick, fast, difficult to cover, and just very nuanced as a route runner. So and we've seen numerous times where against zone coverage, Dante Moore is unable to get the ball to Dakorien Moore because Dakorien's running a man route versus a zone route. But today there were definitely some zone coverage beaters. So Will Stein, I've been very critical of him up to this point. Will Stein called a great ball game today, outside of the first possession. Sorry, excuse me, getting a little bit of a sore throat. And so the first possession, I was pretty nervous because 3 straight pass plays and god awful rain. Like, I liked the aggression. I criticized him against Wisconsin for not being aggressive enough. I criticized him against Penn State for not being aggressive enough. I criticized him against Indiana for not being aggressive enough. So I liked the aggression despite the rainy weather. But I didn't love 3 straight pass plays for a 3-and-out against Iowa on your first drive. But then Will Stein did a great job of locking in and saying, hey, I'm going to run the ball. Because that's what Oregon does. We're a top 10 rush offense in the country. Let's run the ball down their throat. And they did. And Will Stein said, oh, you guys can't stop inside zone, or you can't stop halfback stretch, or you can't stop halfback counter. Let me just run that until the wheels fall off. And that's what he did all game. And that's why they put up, you know, over 7 yards a carry and 61 yards rushing. So huge credit to Will Stein. I think he called a brilliant ball game. And I think the defense really stepped up too. Obviously, they've been really criticized for their rush defense and struggling against the run. Today, they played brilliantly. You know, they held Iowa, who wants to run the ball, to 2.3 yards per rush and 101 rushing yards. So this team played at an elite level today without 3 of their best playmakers. Like, that can't be understated enough. Jamari Johnson stepped up huge. I've been really critical of him throughout the year for being inconsistent, and I saw it click in his brain when Gary Bryant Jr. went off. I saw it click in Jamari Johnson Jr., and he played different today than he's been playing all year. You know, again, yes, this team is young, but it's a huge and can't be understated enough that with all this adversity, this young team stepped up. We're down late. ESPN gave them a 20% chance to win after Mark Gronowski scored that touchdown. 20%. And they went down the field. Dante Moore threw one of the prettiest passes you'll ever see in your entire life. Went down the field, kicked a field goal with a struggling kicker. Like, this is huge. This team grew up today. I hope you guys realize that this team grew up in front of our eyes today. Dante Moore did. The young freshman running backs did. Janoris Wilson did, stepping in for Alex Harkey at right tackle. Atticus Sappington. You know, I'm just so proud of this team. I really think that this team can go deep, and I've never questioned that. There's never been a moment this year, you know, during the Penn State game, during the struggles against Wisconsin, during the Indiana loss, I've never questioned Oregon's ability to make a deep playoff run. And I looked at the Indiana loss as an opportunity, and I really think that this team is going to take this opportunity, get the ball rolling, and can make a deep playoff run. I've been saying it all year. I really think that this team is better than last year's team, and I still stand by that. And we may get Evan Stewart back. I hope we get Dakorien Moore back ASAP. I hope we get Kenyon Sadiq back. I really think Kenyon Sadiq has been battling something all year. So I think that this was more of a precautionary thing. So I think we should get Kenyon Sadiq back next game. I think we should get Dakorien Moore back next game. If we don't get Alex Harkey back, Janoris Wilson proved that, you know, that's just fine. I don't know what year Janoris Wilson's in, but I was extremely impressed with him all game. Janoris Wilson. Or it's Janoris Wilson. Oh, he's a redshirt sophomore? Redshirt freshman. Oh, he's a redshirt sophomore. So he stepped up huge in an extremely tough environment. Let's see. I'm going to pull up my notes. Oh, another thing I wanted to touch on is Bear Alexander played extremely well today. And honestly, you could make the argument he's been the most consistent Ducks player really on both sides of the ball all season. So statistically, he had a good game. But in reality, he's been causing so much more chaos throughout the entire season. So he was 7th on the team in tackles with 1 solo tackle. You know, nothing for loss or anything, but he played extremely well. You know, forcing plays back inside, getting great penetration, and just overall blowing up plays. And another thing that I think this Oregon team did a better job of today than they've been doing against the run is you saw the Iowa backs were consistently getting hit in the backfield. You know, so yes, a lot of times on first down, they would get 5 yards, 4 yards, something like that. But they were always getting hit in the backfield. And that's huge because Iowa's system, they love to have their running backs pick up steam while they're still in the backfield. So then by the time they hit the line of scrimmage, you know, they're going to fall forward for 6, 7, 8 yards. And that just didn't happen today. What their longest rush of the day, what did it end up being, 8 or 9? Or no, Kamari Moulton got a 16-yard rush, I think late in that drive where they ultimately scored the touchdown. But outside of that, Mark Gronowski had an 8-yard rush on a quarterback draw, and then Caden Wedgen, I think is how you pronounce it, had a 9-yard rush on a toss play or something like that. So, and the key to that was Bear Alexander, was Matayo Uiagalelei and Tatum Tuioti forcing those plays back inside. You know, Bear Alexander, Amari Washington, getting their hands on those guys in the backfield and preventing them from picking up steam. And so I guess now I'll talk about the negatives. Well, okay, first, want to go over a couple of, let's see, environmental things, I'll call them. One, the refs missed so many holding calls. That was pretty frustrating. There were a lot of holding calls. And I'm not just saying, like, I agree with the notion, like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard, you could call holding on pretty much every play. I agree with that. If it doesn't affect the play, whoop-de-doo, whatever. But there was one play, it was in the second half, Matayo Uiagalelei had his hands on Mark Gronowski's nameplate and was actively getting held. Like, you saw his jersey getting held by the Iowa offensive lineman, and Mark Gronowski was able to get the ball away because Matayo was being held. And there were several run plays where, yes, they would only go for 3 or 4 yards, but again, there was holding, like, hooking players, and I agree that there were certainly holding calls on the Ducks as well that they didn't call, but I felt like it was egregious, and they started calling them late in the game. I just think that there should be consistency, and I feel like it wasn't consistent today. So yes, I agree. There were certainly missed holding calls on the Ducks. You know, there were most likely some missed pass interference calls, but I think also especially the last shot to the end zone on Malik Benson, that was definitively defensive pass interference on Iowa. So that was pretty frustrating. I just felt like the refs weren't consistent today. And that's all I ever ask. I just want consistency. So while late in the game, you're going to be calling those holding calls on Oregon, which was huge on that last drive where it pushed them out of field goal range. There were so many holding calls in Iowa that just weren't called. And then also CBS, man, like growing up, I loved the CBS broadcasters. Gary Danielson hates Oregon. Don't know why. Don't know what Oregon ever did to him. But Gary Danielson and Brad Nessler, anytime the Ducks did something positive, they looked to critique it. There was on the forced fumble, before they even had a clear view, they were like, oh, that's not a fumble. He's definitely down. I don't know what they're talking about. Why are they even looking at this? And then they tried to say the guy had possession when he was squeezing it between his thighs. Like, you've been watching football for how long, and you don't know that doesn't count as possession? Like, and there were just more missed holding calls that went the Ducks. Were they even called for one? Was Iowa called for one holding call? I don't think they were. No, so Iowa wasn't. I don't know. We'll agree to disagree on that one. I see your point. You're saying that there were more, the Ducks were holding more often than they weren't called. I digress. So, but this also happened earlier in the year. The Indiana game, I felt this way about Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson. And then one of the earlier games, I forget whether it was it wasn't the Northwestern game. It was one of the other games on CBS. I feel like they're just hypercritical of Oregon. And it finally took that last throw from Moore to Malik Benson down the sideline for the announcers to be like, wow, great plays by Oregon. I don't get it. I don't know what Oregon ever did to them. So that's extremely frustrating. Some other areas where the Ducks can improve. Obviously DB2, cornerback 2 is refs blew that whistle on the fumble, and that's why the Ducks got that fumble though. At the end of the day, one can't blame any of the game on the refs. Oh yeah, I agree. I'm not saying that game was as close as it was because of the refs. I'm not saying that at all. And I agree with you. How many snaps are there in a football game? So I'm not saying that one call can really change a game. While it may seem like it in the moment, I agree. You can't blame an entire game on refs. So yeah, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it's something that was a little frustrating. You're right. I did see some missed calls. There was probably a pass interference on the Ducks that they missed. So yes, I agree that no game is won and lost by the refs. However, the refs missed calls on both sides, including a couple of egregious holding calls on Iowa that directly impacted that last drive. But again, all credit to Iowa. They played a phenomenal game. They're a great football team. They're extremely well coached. They have a lot of talent. They had a great game plan. So this game was not only close because of the refs. I hope I'm making myself abundantly clear with that. But DB2, it's a clear weakness of the Ducks, and we've known this throughout the year. They've tried out Theron Johnson. They've tried out Jaden Kennedy a little bit, who's more of a slot. They've tried out Ife Obadegwu. At times, they've tried out Naeem Offord. So that's a clear weakness. And I think just pass coverage as a whole is inconsistent on the Ducks, except for Brandon Finney Jr., but we saw it with the safeties today. They're definitely more run aggressive, we'll call it run positive. But to be fair, it was cover 2, which means the middle of the field's going to be open, and the tight end ran a post up the middle of the field. So that was going to be open either way. But pass coverage as a whole on the Ducks could improve. But at the same breath, I think the run defense really improved today, and those plays were most likely generated by Iowa being such a run-heavy team. So let's see. Talked about the refs, talked about CBS, talked about Oregon can improve in pass coverage. Dante Moore, I've talked about, he could be a little bit more consistent as well. We've talked about the offensive line and pass pro. Although today they were a little bit better. Again, thanks to James H6846, I agree. There were, missed holding calls in pass pro. But overall, Oregon played a great game, and they gutted out a really tough, gritty win. So Oregon, what does this game mean moving forward? So the Big Ten standings get a little bit more interesting. Before today, the Big Ten was basically completely wide open, and today kind of knocked Iowa out for the time being of making the Big Ten championship. But, to this, at this point, it's still very realistic. Indiana could make the Big Ten championship game, obviously. Ohio State, obviously. And then one-loss teams, Michigan, USC, and Oregon. So there's still 5 teams at least that are very much still in the driver's seat right now for the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis at the beginning of December. Iowa was obviously a one-loss team before today, but we'll see how that goes. I really don't see Indiana losing out. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments if you guys think that'll change. Indiana only has 2 games left on the year. They get Wisconsin at home, tough team, and then at Purdue. We saw what Ohio State did to Purdue today. I could see Ohio State losing to Michigan at the end of the year, which would make things really interesting, especially because the conferences are so big now. I don't know how those tiebreakers would work. Because, so let's say Oregon wins out. That means USC would have another loss, so that knocks them out. And let's say Michigan beats Ohio State, and let's say Indiana wins out. So Indiana's in. But then the second team in the Big Ten championship would be a tiebreak. Michigan would have the tiebreaker over Ohio State in that case, if they each have one conference loss. So it'd be a tiebreaker between Michigan and Oregon. I don't know how those tiebreakers work. Every conference is different, and they go to like shared opponents and win margin and stuff. But it's tough because Oregon didn't. Okay, so the last few opponents that Michigan and Oregon will share, they didn't play Oregon or Maryland, and Michigan plays Maryland next week or in a couple weeks. They'll play Northwestern, but Oregon didn't play Purdue. Oregon didn't play Michigan State. Oregon will play Washington. Oregon will play USC. Oregon will play Wisconsin. So I guess there's 1, 2, 3. There will be 4 shared opponents between Michigan and Oregon if that situation happens. I'm not saying it is. There's a lot of football to be played. We were 36 seconds away today from that being a very different playoff picture and Big Ten championship picture. But you could make the same argument in the Oregon Iowa game. So I'm just saying, if Oregon wins out and Michigan wins out and beats Ohio State, the Big Ten championship race becomes very interesting. In the end, I'm not going to predict Michigan to beat Ohio State. I think Ohio State can beat Michigan this year. I think the national championship maybe cleared away some of the demons that has mentally blocked Ohio State about that game, about the game. So personally, I'm picking Ohio State over Michigan in that one. I know my good friend Jared, who's a longtime watcher and frequently on these chats and big Ohio State fan, he's convinced Michigan will beat them. But things would get very interesting. But ultimately, I think Indiana and Ohio State are the 2 best teams in the Big Ten. I think they will go to the Big Ten championship game. And I think the Big Ten only ends up getting... Well, no, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say that the Big Ten will get 3 teams in to the playoff. But because the ACC has completely fallen apart, they have Virginia, Georgia Tech, and Pitt as their top 3 teams currently in the ACC, and Louisville. So I don't see the ACC getting more than 2. So okay, so you have the 5 conference champions. You have the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, SEC, and then the Group of 5 champion. Okay, so thanks for the question, AZ Merce. So there's no intentional grounding on 3rd down because there was a receiver in the area. If he gets out of the pocket, and and even though the ball didn't get to the line of scrimmage, there was a receiver in the area, which means that it's not intentional grounding. Yeah, so that was a great call by the refs. If I'm going to be critical of them, I also want to give them their roses. No one went out. Sorry, AZ Merce, I don't know what that one means, but yeah, so there was a receiver in the general area. I'm perfectly fine with no intentional grounding, and if I'm going to be critical of the refs, that was a great call by them. So, playoff picture is Big 12. I could see them getting 2. They're not going to get more than 2. No receivers were in the play. There was one in the general area. There was one. Their TD, the receiver was blocking the whole time. Their TD. Sorry, Frog Leaps 420. I don't understand that comment either. Yeah, Frog Leaps. I'm more than glad to hit on it. What do you mean their TD, the receiver was blocking the whole time? Because Oregon's touchdown was a rushing touchdown, and then Iowa's touchdown was also a rushing touchdown. While I wait for those responses. So the ACC definitely isn't going to get more than the tight end coming out to the corner. The receiver didn't run a route. Oh. I don't know about that. He looked like he was running a route to me. But even so, as long as he's an eligible receiver, he technically is still a receiver in the area on the play. So. I would love to find that play. I just don't know if I can find that in a reasonable amount of time on the stream. But I mean, just very quickly when I was watching it, that was my immediate thought was there. I saw a black jersey in the area, and as long as he was an eligible receiver, it technically should have been. It would not have been intentional grounding. So the playoff discussion. The Big 10, they get at least 3 for sure. The Big 12, they're not getting more than 2, so we'll call it. I think they deserve 2, so that's 5. The ACC, realistically, I think they deserve 1. The Power 5 will be 1. And then the SEC, they had one touchdown. Watch it. Okay. Is it Iowa or Oregon? I'm assuming you mean Iowa. Oregon, Iowa, highlights. Okay, so Iowa's touchdown, so it's late in the game. So the reason so that's a designed run. So that means that they can block whoever they want. We're like, are you saying that it should be like pass interference? Wasn't the ball going forward? I'm sorry, I'm not following. So on Iowa's touchdown, it's a designed quarterback run. It's a quarterback draw. And even I'm looking at number 81 in the slot. He is running a route. He's just, they're both hand fighting the linebacker and the tight end. And it's technically more than 5 yards down the field, which is the rule in college. However, if they both have hands on each other and the ball's not in the air, they're not going to call it. And also, like I said, it's a designed quarterback run, and everyone else to me is selling a pass at that moment. I don't know what you mean by wasn't the ball going forward, because the ball never leaves his hand. Do you maybe mean on the failed 2-point conversion? I don't know. Sorry, Frog Leaps. It's definitely a quarterback run. And really there's only one matchup on that play. It's the linebacker it's Jerry Mixon on a tight end in the slot. But by the time the tight end actually puts his hand on the linebacker to actually block, I think Gronowski's already across the line of scrimmage. So again, that's a run play at that point. So they wouldn't call that a pass interference or anything, especially since the ball was never in the air. The tight end and the linebacker both had hands on each other. Yeah. Sorry, Frog Leaps. Sorry, I'm not following the question. So would love to hear from you guys in the comments about what you guys think about the playoff race. It obviously not too many upsets today. So maybe not as big of an impact today as we've seen in previous weeks, but I think we're definitely starting to see some contenders carved out. Isn't there an all-state tool? We were talking about different plays. All good, buddy. Oh, I'm sorry. Iowa scored a touchdown in the first half. I am so sorry. Jesus. Sorry, my brain is... Okay. Let's go to that play. Okay. You're talking about in the first half. Okay. I'm watching the play now. Yeah, so I see what you're saying. So he's talking about the touchdown pass from the 3. The tight end is on the end, and then there's a wide receiver blocking the entire time. So technically, the ball looks like it was thrown at or behind the line of scrimmage. So first of all, technically that is fine for there to be blocking. That's how screenplays work. Is if the pass is at or behind the line of scrimmage, that means anyone can be blocking at any time. But also, since that's within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage, that means that technically that could just be jam coverage. So that is allowed as well. So it's kind of a really nuanced thing, but I see your point. But it looks like the ball, at least on the broadcast, the broadcast view, it looks like the tight end is like literally like half a yard behind the line of scrimmage, or is right on it. And then again, the receiver, that could, you could make the argument that that's just jam coverage. See your point, but again, it's effectively functioning as a screenplay, so that's why it's not pass interference or anything. It is an interesting point. If the pass was another couple of yards upfield, I could absolutely see your argument, but because it would have been really close. It was either on the line of scrimmage or just behind it. I definitely see your point there. So great call out, Frog Leaps. I like the analysis. I didn't catch that when I was watching it, so great call out. Thank you for pointing that out. There's a lot of nuance to stuff like that, and sometimes, unless it's like egregious, I think the refs just play to the nuance, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of, they play a little bit to intent, just so then there's not like penalties on every play. But yeah, that's a great point. I really appreciate the point, and that's a great opportunity. I was actually thinking about it in this game, like whenever I was seeing Poncho, the Oregon Ducks center, like in the last game there was an illegal snap, and like there's just so much nuance to football that I think a lot of people that maybe just tune in occasionally like just don't realize. Like that's an extremely nuanced play, and Frog Leaps pointed it out, and I just wasn't thinking about it in the moment. There's a lot of nuance to even just a simple tight end screen, and even just like what a center can do once he puts his hand on the ball. So really, that was really interesting. Thank you for pointing that out. And just like there's so much about like alignment, and I was watching what game was it last week? Oh, it was the Oklahoma Tennessee game last week, and I was watching it with some people that aren't, they watch it with football with me, but they're not big college football people. And when I think it was Gavin Sawchuk transferred to Florida State, it was one of the Oklahoma running backs busted up that 50-yard run late in the game, and then he went down at the 1 yard line. And the people I was watching with just turned to me like they saw someone like fly for the first time. Like they were so shocked. Like, why would he do that? And football's so interesting because there is such nuance, and there's not like with clock management. So this brings up a good discussion. The announcers, Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson, at the end of the first half were kind of questioning Oregon's clock management. And I certainly see their point. I agree that if you are being aggressive, Oregon should have called more timeouts. They maybe should have called more timeouts on the final drive. But in the first half, there was a pass to Noah Whittington that they didn't call a timeout. And there were a couple of passes short of the sticks that maybe would have saved them more time. But if we look at the situation at the end of the first half, it's 9-7. Oregon's in the lead. There's 45 seconds left. Iowa has just hit some big explosive plays, runs from Mark Gronowski, a big tight end wheel route to get them down to the 2 or 3, which then caused that tight end screenplay effectively to score to the touchdown. And Oregon gets the ball to start the second half. If I'm Dan Lanning, I know this is going to be a tough game where points are at a premium. I know I can get a field goal. I'm not going to fight it over a touchdown. I'm totally fine with him not risking giving Iowa back the ball. That was making explosive plays at that point. And I think the defense was gassed too. So I think Dan Lanning really didn't want his defense to be on the field anymore. Even if you look at the time of possession for the whole game, Iowa had possession for 33 minutes versus Oregon's 26. And at the end of the game, Tatum was the defense was gassed, and understandably so. I'm not knocking them on their conditioning or anything. I'm just saying, like, Oregon's defense was on the field a lot, and I think Dan Lanning was more playing to the, protecting his defense, protecting points, not risking giving up 7 or even another 3 to score 3. So that's at least a 6-point swing, if not a 10-point swing. So technically, I will say that Dan Lanning's clock management at the end of the first half probably isn't proper clock management. I didn't hate it, and that's exactly what I wrote down was I don't hate the clock management. I understand it. I would much, after thinking about it, maybe I would have been different if the Ducks, would have been more aggressive and scored a touchdown. I'm glad that they did the clock management that they did, just so that explosive Iowa offense that had just been on the field for a huge drive, and the gas defense, and to protect his defense going into the half, and Oregon got the ball to start the second half. If Oregon didn't get the ball to start the second half, cool. All for being aggressive, go for it. But totally understand. Dan Lanning really values the end of the first half and the beginning of the second half. Which the beginning of the second half, the Ducks played like crap. But still, that was a huge moment for them. So it's a nuanced thing. There's definitely a correct way to do clock management, and there's not. But then there's also a big gray area. Like, I think Curt Cignetti at the end of the Penn State game today obviously had masterful clock management. Like, I don't think it gets better than that. It's not an exact science of... Lately, there's been this trend ever since the 2-minute warning came into college football of some people use all their timeouts before the 2-minute timeout, and then they use the 2-minute timeout as one of their timeouts on offense. Some people keep it until after the 2-minute timeout. But I think Curt Cignetti did a really good job. Was he called timeouts before the 2-minute warning when Penn State was on third down, which I thought was really clever. And there was one other timeout, but Curt Cignetti, if you want to watch just like masterful clock management, go back and rewatch the final 3 to 4 minutes of the Penn State Indiana game today. Perfect clock management. But there is also a gray area, and I think that the clock management at the end of the first half today was a little bit more in that gray area, but ultimately was the right option. And then the clock management at the end of the second half, I think could have been better. Obviously, ultimately it worked out. But the only reason why I was maybe a little critical of the one at the end of the second half was I still wasn't very confident in Atticus Sappington. He had hit 2 big kicks earlier on in the game, but I was still a little worried about his consistency, and I really wanted that kick to be as close as possible for him. Ultimately, I was wrong, and Dan Lanning knows this team a lot better than I do. But the clock management wasn't perfect at the end, but it ended up working out. The college football has a lot of nuance. A lot of people think it's just, be bigger, faster, stronger, and there's very clear-cut mistakes on every play and blah, 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 blah. There's not. Like, the game is extremely nuanced, and that's why I can come on here and talk for, what have I been on here, an hour and 7 minutes after a game, and people do this for every game that happens every college football Saturday and every NFL Sunday, and there's millions of dollars in this industry because it's all nuanced and it's all amazing, and the ball's not round, it's in oblong shape and it bounces in weird ways. So yeah, in the short of it, college football is great, I guess. And there's a lot of nuance. Like, I talked earlier about Dakorien Moore being such a nuanced route runner, and how to sell a double move. It sounds simple, like, okay, you just need to turn your head and then turn your head the other way. But it's so nuanced, and that's why there's so much time that it takes to become a good football player and a nuanced receiver. And that's why what Dakorien Moore is doing is so impressive, because he's a freshman. He's a true freshman. And he has nuanced. A lot of freshmen just bank on the fact that they can be faster than people or that they can be quicker. What do you think happened to our pass game as a whole? So that's a good question. My thoughts on this is I think it's been a weakness of Will Stein. I don't think it's been a weakness of any particular player. I think Dante Moore's been a little inconsistent. I think that's, I don't know if you would face much disagreement with that if you said that in any circle, really. My thoughts on the pass game is Will Stein hasn't set them up to be in successful positions. I feel like he's been a little too conservative sometimes, a lot of the time. And I feel like today he was finally just the correct amount of aggressive. And we saw some big down the field shots. There was the sail route in the first half to Jamari Johnson. There was the big over route to Gary Bryant Jr. late in the half where he got injured. I think that's where Oregon really succeeds. And I think after we got past the Northwestern game and started getting to the Penn State game was the first one where I'm like, okay, you were a little too conservative in the first half for my liking. And then come the Indiana game, or 2 weeks later, I don't think Will Stein, I don't know if he didn't have those plays in his repertoire, but Indiana plays a lot of zone coverage and he didn't call enough zone beaters that play. And he didn't have enough zone beaters lined up for Dakorien Moore. So I think that's what happened to our pass game was Will Stein has gotten way too conservative the last few weeks, and against better competition, he gets more aggressive. And it's like, we don't know if being aggressive like doesn't work out. You know what I mean? Like that's been my biggest critique of Will Stein is like, they were very aggressive in the first 5 games. So try to be aggressive against Penn State, like see what happens. You know what I mean? And it ultimately ended up working out on that 2-minute drill at the end of the first half in the Penn State game, and then it ended up working out in the second half of the Penn State game. And then like I feel like they were way too conservative against Wisconsin. I really think Oregon really can dominate with a down the field passing attack. Set it up with run plays. Set it up with the quick screens and the different, quick throws that is pivotal in Will Stein's offense, but then use that to set up big down the field passing attack, a big down the field passing attack like the sail route to Jamari Johnson, like the over route to Gary Bryant Jr., like the double move to Dakorien Moore that was in the Rutgers game, I believe. And that's been my biggest critique of Will Stein, is that he hasn't set things up enough since the Penn State game, like really the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. But today he did. And today he was willing to ride the run game until Iowa proved that they could stop it, which was never. So that's been my biggest critique, is Oregon, outside of getting injured, has elite offensive weapons. I still stand by, I think Oregon's receivers are better than Indiana's DBs when they're healthy. And that's why Indiana runs a lot of zone, is you run zone when you have DBs that can't keep up with elite wide receivers. Yeah, our zone. So that's a great point too. Oregon's zone coverage has not been awesome, which is interesting because in the past few years, I don't think Oregon's had the talent to run as much man coverage as Tosh Lupoy and Dan Lanning like to run. And this year, I finally feel like they do. And I feel like zone coverage is really lacking. That's a great point. So huge shout out for that. Really, I think our best zone coverage defender is Jerry Mixon. I think Jerry Mixon is good in zone coverage, and we saw that earlier on in the year with his couple of pick sixes. There was one in the Oklahoma State game and one in the Northwestern game. Man, our safeties, like, I think it was just a fluke play. I think it was they were so sold on the run that they got a little undisciplined. And our defense as a whole is extremely disciplined. There was one play, it was, I believe, on Iowa's first offensive drive of the game. They ran a quick wide receiver screen, running back screen, something like that, and you saw every player not rush up the field and like sit on the screen. So overall, this team is extremely disciplined, but I agree. The zone coverage this year, while our man coverage is like infinitely better, our zone coverage has started to slack a little bit. And yeah, you're right. I don't see enough of the sit and move that you're talking about. I feel like they're a little too lax in their zones. and like you said, they don't move. They kind of get into their zone, and then unless there's that first obvious read, they don't cover it. So I think, you know, obviously I'm not a defensive coordinator, so I don't know how to improve that. I think Theron Johnson Jr. I think he's a good cornerback. His play on the field doesn't necessarily reflect that, and I know how weird that sounds, but I think he's a good zone corner. I think Thieneman is a great zone safety. Aaron Flowers, like, I think he's more, if I'm being honest, I think he's more of a nickel corner. So I think he's great in man. I think he loves to play the run, and he's great at playing the run. But like as a deep field safety, I don't think that's Aaron Flowers' bag. And it is a little concerning because like the Ducks have a lot of players like that, like Kingston Lopa, Aaron Flowers. All these guys are like you're talking about, like they're more run heavy safeties. And we don't have a ton of that deep field safety. And if you guys have been watching this channel long enough, you know that I have a massive crush on Trey McNutt. And I think Trey McNutt, even though he's a true freshman, I think he can be that. So he's been out with a broken leg, and he should be coming back any week now. But like, let's see, DBs. So Aaron Flowers loves to play the run. Dylan Thieneman, you know, he's great against the run. I think he can be a deep safety. Let's see. Jerry Mixon is great against the pass, and I think is great in zone coverage. Bryce Betcher just isn't quick enough at the linebacker position, and we've seen that come up time and time again. Jaden Kennedy, he's really a nickel. Brandon Finney, elite man-to-man corner on the outside. Ife Obadegwu, man coverage is his bag. He's just been getting a little handsy lately. Naeem Offord, he's just young. I think he can be good in man coverage, but zone coverage is tougher for younger guys. Let's see. I think Kamar Mathuti is fine in zone coverage. But like, I mean, you know, it's a problem in zone coverage. The Ducks have a problem in zone coverage with the amount that they drop Blake Purchase out into zone coverage, who's honestly really good because he's so long. But yeah, you make a great point. The Ducks struggle a little bit in zone coverage, which could hurt them long term. But I've been really impressed with how much they've improved over with man coverage lately, the last few years. And the Ducks the last few years have had a lot of fan favorites in the secondary, but I feel like they haven't. The secondary has really been what's held the last few defenses back. And I feel like this year, finally, with this recruiting class, I think Naeem Offord will be a great DB. I think Brandon Finney Jr. obviously is a phenomenal DB. I think Aaron Flowers, if he can focus more on coverage, I think he can be, you know, elite. Kingston Lopa, Trey McNutt, like there's a lot of really young guys. Ife Obadegwu, like there's a lot of potential in this secondary room, and I feel like they just now are starting to get the guys into the building that they need to run the type of defense that they want, which is pretty scary when you think about it with how good the defenses have been as a whole, you know, the last few years. Peyton Woodyard, I feel like I always, oh no, he is a younger guy. He's a sophomore. I think like Oregon secondary finally starting to look a lot like, you know, like the Georgia secondaries. Also with receivers, we struggle. Yes. Yeah. I agree with you. They don't seem to be able to read it as a whole. Yeah. Great point. And yeah, if you want more evidence of that, look at, you know, what happened against Indiana. Was Dakorien Moore had 4 touches that game or something. And yeah, there were in that game, there was also a lot of miscommunications. And I think more of what that is what you're saying of, you know, the receivers not reading it correctly. I don't think Dante reads zone as well as I don't think he's perfect against zone coverage. I'm going to say that. Let's see. What did Dante do or Dakorien do against Indiana? Yeah, Dakorien only had 4 touches for 39 yards against Indiana. They don't see it instead. Yes, exactly. Yep, I agree. Really, the only receiver that does is Kenyon Sadiq. I think he does a good job of finding the soft spots in the zone. I've written that note down a couple of games. But obviously we didn't have him this game. But Kenyon Sadiq does a good job of sitting and settling in zones. And you're right, the receivers just do not. That's why I was kind of hoping. Obviously, it worked out, but I was kind of hoping that Whittington was going to shift out to receiver once Gary Bryant Jr. went down, because I think Whittington is a great receiving option at the running back position. I feel like he always has been. So I wasn't excited for it, but I was like, I'm a little curious to see if they start using Whittington out on the edge. They ended up not. He ended up having a great game as a running back. But I think Whittington has the nuance to be able to read zone like that just with his experience. But yeah, you're right. Which, I mean, the receivers are just really young. Like I get this team is as a whole, but Oregon. Yeah, he is. I love Whittington. Like, he's right up there with Bucky Irving with me. I think he can be just as good in the NFL as Bucky Irving. Obviously his size hurts him a little bit. But I had a couple of audio issues, so I've done a few live streams. I don't remember if I've said it on this one. I think that Whittington can be a 3rd or 4th round NFL talent. And can go on to kind of shock the league like Bucky Irving has a little bit. I don't know if he'll be drafted that high just because of his size, but he's so physical and so fast and quick and smart and great in pass protection, which can honestly make a whole career. Is if a running back can be good in pass coverage, like, teams will crave that. Man, but especially once Gary Bryant Jr. went down, they have Dakorien Moore wasn't out, but just in general, there's a true freshman Dakorien Moore, true freshman Cooper Perry, Justice Lowe is a redshirt junior, but he hasn't played a ton, so he is inexperienced. And then Jeremiah McClellan, redshirt freshman. Lot of talent, lot of talent with Jeremiah McClellan, but again, just young and, like you said, doesn't see zone. Soft hands and definitely smart. Yeah, love Whittington. So the broadcasters really pointed out, I think it was on the last drive. It was on the last drive of either the first half or the second half. The great catch that he had short of the sticks, that they thought Oregon should have called a timeout on. Like, he routinely makes catches better than that. I'm not taking anything away from that catch, but, like, for him, that's like kind of an average catch that he makes. And I don't think that gets talked about enough. I love Noah Whittington. He's obviously extremely loyal to the Ducks program, so he's a fan favorite. He's so physical, so fast, so quick. Not a day goes by that I don't think about how he there was a blitz that he picked up against Oklahoma State, and I think about that play, I'm not kidding, every single day. Just boom, like, hits the guy. So love Noah Whittington. Hopefully the Ducks get Jaden Lamar back soon. I know he's kind of fallen out of grace with the Ducks fans, but I think if the Ducks are going to go as far as I think they can go, they're going to need Jaden Lamar back, and they're going to need to start rotating in Jay Harris when they can, especially against Minnesota this week. I'm not saying, like, I'm saying, especially since we came up with a bunch of injuries after a bye week, the Ducks are really going to need to rotate bodies against Minnesota on a short week, Friday night game, before USC at home the following weekend. Like, I really hope we get some health back, because we're going to need it if we're going to go as far as I think we can. Go to the college football playoff rankings again. Because so last year when I was looking at, as the playoff rankings were coming out and every possible matchup that came up, I'm like, man, I just don't I don't know if Oregon can beat that team. We can beat that team, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, so if we're just looking around, obviously BYU lost, so they'll drop. I think Oregon could smoke Texas Tech. Like, I'm not worried about Texas Tech at all. Watch that be a soundbite, come December 19th. I think Oregon's far more talented than Ole Miss. I think Oregon's more talented than Georgia. Like, talent-wise, really, I think Oregon is really a top 4 team in terms of talent. It's just going to be, can they put it all together like last year's Ohio State? That was the key. Was Chip Kelly wasn't calling the right plays. Will Howard was being inconsistent. Once those things click together, national championship. I really think, if Dante Moore plays to his full potential every game and Will Stein is aggressive and is calling plays like he was today outside of the first possession, I really think this team can make a deep playoff run and can beat a Texas A&M. I'm not complaining about Texas A&M being ranked number 3 because I think they've earned that as a resume. Do I think they're the 3rd best team in the country? No. I think their offense has a lot of holes in it. And their defense, I don't think is as good as it was last year. It's still very good, don't get me wrong. But I think this year there's a lot more mortal teams than what I felt like last year. If Oregon plays the way they did against Indiana, they're not going to beat Ohio State. They're not going to beat Texas A&M. They're not going to beat Alabama. They're not going to beat Georgia. Heck, they probably wouldn't even beat Ole Miss. But if Oregon plays like we've seen flashes of throughout the season, they can beat Ohio State. They can beat Indiana. They can beat Alabama. They can beat Georgia. They can beat Texas A&M. So that's why I'm saying, if this team plays their best, they are by far better than last year's team, and they are arguably the best team in the country. It's just, I'm not going to argue against the committee putting them at 9, or the AP putting them at 6, because they haven't earned it. They have been pretty inconsistent for a lot of the year. So it's going to be interesting as we go down the stretch. Obviously, like the broadcasters have talked about, and like we've known for weeks, this is a extremely pivotal stretch. And while Minnesota on the surface doesn't seem like that great of an opponent, it's just a tough situation. Short week. They play on Friday. Coming off a big emotional win like this, Friday night game, that's a little tougher to mentally prepare for. It's a pivotal game. I think all 3 of these upcoming games have their own unique challenges. And then USC, while USC, their defense has a lot of holes in it, and Northwestern exposed that last night, and I really think the Ducks have the potential to run all over USC in terms of running the ball against that defense. Mekhi Lemon and Jaden Mayav are dangerous. Jacoby Lane, they have a couple of tight ends. Obviously, their rushing attack with King Mack and the guys that got injured. So it's going to be a pivotal stretch for the Ducks. This is what builds their resume. If they go into the playoff rankings or the final playoff rankings with a win at Iowa, at home against USC, and at Washington, that's a great resume. That's one of the best resumes in the country, statistically, talent-wise. In terms of the eye test, this team is one of the best teams in the country. So it's gonna be interesting as we go down the stretch. Yeah. Other than that, I'm just gonna do a quick score check, just to see where we're at. So Alabama's running all over LSU, so no shock there. Cal is currently up on Louisville in the 4th quarter. That's interesting. That would really shake things up, and that would almost certainly mean the ACC gets no more than 2, if not 1 team in. That could really do the ACC in. Holy crap, Kentucky's blowing the brakes off Florida. And Notre Dame's blowing the brakes off Navy, so no shock there. The group of 5 race gets really interesting for the playoffs after last night, after Tulane beat Memphis. I just really hope that doesn't mean that in the next playoff format, there's no guaranteed seed for the group of 5. I think since there's enough teams like last year's Boise State that deserve to be in the playoff, look back at, the Northern Illinois team that made the Orange Bowl against Florida State, 10 years ago or so. I think that the group of 5 deserves a guaranteed seed, and I hope that going into effectively a contract year, I hope that this doesn't blow the chances, because realistically this year, I don't know if there's a group of 5 team that deserves to be in the playoff. I would personally love to see North Texas. North Texas is really fun to watch. With their quarterback, he's going to get a big NIL payday and a big payday in the transfer portal this coming offseason. I would love to see James Madison. I think that would be really cool if we could somehow get a James Madison-Indiana matchup. I think that would be a really interesting game. Right now I'm talking about the playoff format and playoff implications moving forward and who I think deserves to make the playoff. So I hope that this year, while it's a little bit of a down year for the group of 5, I hope that this doesn't blow their chances of ever. So Frog Leap said, knowing we can run. Last, 3 games? We've thrown the first 3 plays. The last how many games and went 3 and out? Why do you think the coaching staff come out with these types of plays off the rip? So that's a good question. I feel like today I think Dan Lanning had talked to Will Stein about being aggressive, because last game against Wisconsin, they kicked the onside kick and then were very conservative on offense. And so I think there's been some talks between Will Stein and Dan Lanning about overall aggression, and I felt like the offensive philosophy didn't match the philosophy of literally the entire team against Wisconsin. And so I feel like Will Stein, it's his attempt at being aggressive, but he's not actually willing to throw the ball downfield. So again, today the first play was an RPO, fine, whatever. And then there were 2 pass plays, but they weren't really down the field pass plays. They were, typically they were effectively run plays. I'm counting any quick passes out on the edge to a running back or a wide receiver. That's a run play. It's an extension of the run game. So I think it's like this weird compromise / battle between Will Stein and Dan Lanning of trying to be more aggressive, but Will Stein doesn't actually want to be aggressive against decent competition. But it's like, if you look at just with your eyeballs, look at against Penn State going into halftime on that 2-minute drill, he obviously had to be aggressive because it's the end of the first half, and they were moving the ball really well. And today they moved the ball really well with down the field passing. The only game that hasn't been there has been the Indiana game, and that's because Will Stein wasn't calling appropriate pass plays against a zone heavy team. But today he did, and it worked out. So I hope as we go against USC, I hope that it's going to help out the offense a little bit if they don't have to run the ball and grind out every single yard and have Noah Whittington, smash their middle linebacker in the mouth to get a first down. If they can pick a big I don't know what's going through Will Stein's head, but from a fan's perspective, the big chunk pass plays helps out the offense so much. Just let your elite athletes out on the edge go to work. And so I guess that's been my biggest critique of Will Stein. And so that to answer your question, why do I think the coaching staff comes out with those types of plays off the rip? It's I feel like Will Stein is calling those plays to appease Dan Lanning, but he doesn't actually want to do that, even though I think it's what he should do. So I feel like he's half-heartedly calling these things. like, so we've seen, so again, in the second quarter of the Penn State game and different times throughout the year, Will Stein can call 3-play sequences extremely well. Arguably, 3-play sequences as good as anyone in the country, where he clearly has this, like, this card, and they've practiced it in the offseason, they practice it in practice, and the players don't even need to look at their wristband. They know play number 1, play number 2, play number 3, and they've scored touchdowns multiple times on those plays. I don't get why Will Stein doesn't do that every game. Like, I don't... RPO is set up from a run, which you have to set up with middle edge runs. RPO is set up from a run, which you have to set up. I disagree with that. I think RPO, it doesn't have to be set up, and I think that's why it's so prevalent in college. Is it takes a basic offensive principle, which is make the defense, make it impossible for them to be correct, and that's what an RPO is you line up and you count the box. How many defensive players are in the box? If the numbers are friendly, meaning there's a 1-to-1 ratio, or if you have more blockers than you have defenders, you run the ball. And that, that could be the defensive philosophy is, go pass heavy, play more pass coverage. So I'm going to disagree that RPO is set up from a run. And I think it can sometimes be used as the catalyst to set other stuff up. Because, and then again, like we see with Oregon's RPOs a lot, is a common RPO they run is they'll run trips. So 3 wide receivers out on the edge. Or today there was the quad. There was the 4 wide receivers in the diamond formation, and you saw them. It was down on inside the 5, and it was clearly a read. So at first there were only 4 wide DBs out there for 4 wide receivers. And as soon as the 5th guy ran out there, everyone knew Dante Moore was running the ball. So I'm going to disagree that you don't have to set up RPOs. And that's why sometimes when you're looking at the NFL draft evaluation process, that's why sometimes a quarterback can be critiqued for running an RPO system, like some people say about Fernando Mendoza. It's because it's more scheme that are getting these guys open and getting favorable numbers. So the RPOs, I'm fine with that being the first play. I think it's actually kind of an interesting first play option, because if that pass play would have worked, I truly feel like that was just a dropped ball by Jeremiah McClellan on the first play of the game today. That can immediately spread out a defense of like, oh crap, they're coming out passing in this horrible weather, like, dang, like we better send out a bunch of guys on the edge. Oh crap, then we're going to run the ball up the middle. So I don't hate using an RPO early. I don't hate using an RPO down on the goal line, because it's great short yardage. It's great in short yardage situations. And think of it as like zone read or read option has been used in short yardage situations forever. The broadcasters were asking for it, practically the entire game from Iowa. Oh, it's 3rd and 1. Watch out for Mark Gronowski run. Oh, they're down inside the goal line. Watch out for Mark Gronowski run. And so all of this, to me, RPO, zone read, even, using your quarterback as a runner in general, it's putting that defense in a bind of you can't be right. Either you're going to load up the box and you're going to have a one-on-one opportunity out on the edge for a slant or, a go route or whatever the read is, or there's going to be trips and there's only 3 DBs. And so you take that opportunity and you count on one of your guys making a guy miss, or they defend the pass and then the box is empty and then you're able to run the ball. So I think it's a unique play to set up other stuff, to set up a play action, to set up a down the field attack, to set up stuff like, like a under center play action bootleg deep down the field pass. So I think Will Stein I've been really critical of him this season, and even whenever I've seen his name in coaching carousel options, understanding that on RPO, but it doesn't work. Doesn't it work better like anything else? Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because it works even better if, if you're running the ball effectively and you have an RPO and the read is, a slant. We'll say a slant to the left. If the outside linebacker on the left side of the field, if you're running the ball so well and you set that up and you run an RPO and the outside linebacker bites really hard on the run, it works even better. It could set up a touchdown versus it could be the difference between a touchdown and a 5-yard gain. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Yep. I see your point. And that's what I've been critical of Will Stein this year is I feel like he hasn't done enough of that. Like, I feel like he hasn't picked something and stuck with it. Like, there's been, I don't, yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I agree. It would ideally be nice if they waited until RPO. Yeah, you're right. It's not a great first play call. You could make the argument that it is, but probably for the first call of the game, probably not ideal. Especially since a lot of the year, again, against Oklahoma State and Northwestern, the first, play of the game's been a read option up the middle or a zone read up the middle. So, and especially with the way that Oregon ended up running the ball today, it's basic offensive principles, if you can establish the run early. Because then that sets up RPOs. If you're running the ball effectively, it most likely means that they're going to load up the box. So then it's going to set up the pass option on RPO. Sets up play action. Read option is a better fit off the rip. It is because, you can't be right. And if, like you said, the Duck wide receivers were better at zone, there's certain route combinations that put defenders into binds in the secondary that I think would be an interesting first play of the game as well. But yeah, read option off the rip is better. I have a hard time with what Will Stein in this offense thinks of Dante Moore's running ability. And I don't necessarily mean running ability, but his, I don't know if they're trying to protect him, but, they either don't call any designed run plays for him, or they'll call, 3 kind of in a cluster. I feel like in the middle of the game, they really, really took advantage of his legs, but didn't at all in the beginning of the game. So I don't know what to make of that. I think that's an interesting development. It just, again, goes back to Will Stein. He is a little, I feel like wishy-washy is the only way to describe it. He's a little non-committal. Today was the first time in 5 games I've seen him commit to anything, and it was clearly they wanted to run the ball, and they did so effectively. And we saw a few times it ended up working well on play action. And we saw it work well late in the game when there were a lot of one-on-one opportunities down the field, i.e. the Malik Benson, beautiful pass down the sideline. But I feel like for a few games, against Rutgers and the Indiana game, I feel like he wanted to use Davison and Whittington in the first half and then really hit DR Hill heavy in the second half, which I get. More powerful, power heavy guys, wear down the defense, and then use a lightning guy like DR Hill. Makes sense. Totally see it. But he would run DR Hill once, and then DR Hill wouldn't play the rest of the game. It's okay, you may have to try something more than once, to give it a chance. Or I feel like Will Stein, his entire game plan can be thrown off by one blown up play or one tackle for loss, which can sometimes be frustrating, because I think these are effective game plans, or it's I feel like there's more in the second halves of these games. There's been more opportunities to hit play action opportunities than he's taking, or like you're saying, read option. I think Dante Moore is a good enough athlete. Like, you should run that at least once a quarter. You know, even if you're running the ball effectively, run it once a quarter and make those defenders think, like, can I really bite down super hard on the running back key? So I feel like Will Stein, while he improved this game, and while I'm a lot happier with him than I was earlier on in the season, and especially the last few weeks, he showed a lot of growth today. I feel like this entire team did, in a tough situation, with all the injuries, with the weather, with being in a tough place to play against a well-coached team. Our strength has been our defense this year, which is amazing. Yeah, I agree. I was really concerned about the defense coming into this year, obviously with the losses. Mark Herman, I know I don't need to tell you, everything that we lost on defense, but yeah, I agree. The defense has been our strength this year, and I think they're getting better. I think defense played better too. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Frog Leaps. I think, they've been a little bit iffy in pass coverage. In the front, I think the defensive line has been amazing. I don't know if we really can expect better play from what the line has been doing. The linebackers we knew would be, if I'm grading them, the linebackers are honestly like a B minus or maybe a C plus. I love Bryce Betcher, but he just does. He's not quick enough or strong enough for what he is. He's kind of a tweener, and I feel like that's the weakness of the linebackers is we have a bunch of tweeners. Like, I want to Noah Sewell. I'm wearing my number 1 jersey from a few years ago because I love Noah Sewell. Like, have a Noah Sewell in the middle, and then have a Devin Jackson on the outside, who's a freak athlete against the pass, and a Jerry Mixon is more of an outside linebacker, or Tatum Tuioti, who's more of a 3-4 outside linebacker. Linebacker has been B minus C plus, but I feel like our secondary and our defense, particularly our defensive line, have made up for them, which is even more impressive. You know what I mean? If we just had a B linebacker core or a B plus linebacker core, this defense would be talked about one of the best in the country, which I think it is. But I think there's a glaring. And I think even with a better linebacker core, obviously the run defense today would have been even better because of the opportunities for the stops that the defensive line was generating. They did a phenomenal job of creating penetration, blowing up the middle of the play, steering plays back inside. None of this can be discredited, or I don't think it's going to get talked about enough. And I don't think the defensive line, for as well as they play today, I don't think they're going to get the credit they deserve. Excuse me, sorry. But yeah, I feel like today they definitely leaned on the defense heavy, and today in particular proves that the defense is our strength, and today I feel like the game plan really played into that strength. They played into the strength of our defense is our strength, and they played into the fact that our run offense is amazing. So they're going to lean on this Iowa defense and really out physical Iowa, and that's pretty impressive. And it doesn't matter what year it is. If you can be more physical than Iowa, that's impressive. Just with what Kirk Ferentz has done with that program, that you can be more physical than, a Utah, frankly, a Penn State. The heart is there for the linebackers, but they don't make up for yeah, I agree. Yeah. I feel like multiple times, like I mentioned earlier in this live stream, the defensive line would hit a running back, but miss tackle, and I'm not really counting as a missed tackle. I'm counting it more of a holy crap, it's crazy he got a hand on that guy. Sorry, I'm laughing because you're wording it perfectly. If the heart is there for the linebackers, but they don't make up for the fills for the line that the defensive line created, and that's the only reason Iowa got over 100 yards today, which isn't a lot. Like I know I'm nitpicking here, but like if the linebackers would be a little bit better about cleaning up opportunities, then I mean Iowa wouldn't have rushed for 50 yards. Like it would have been crazy. Like the defensive line, they did their job today. And frankly, again, back to your point, that's why they had to have Tatum Tuioti in at quarterback spy on the goal line. I'm not knocking it because I think Tatum can, but like, would I have rather had Noah Sewell there? Yeah. You know, I know I'm blanking on names and that's embarrassing. None. Let's see. Yep, fill the hole and scrape and fill. Yeah, yeah. That's the job of a linebacker. Let's see. Like a Jeffrey Bassa, you know, I feel like he did a good job of doing that. Like even Justin Jacobs, I feel like did a good job of that. I'm looking at last year's roster. I love Blake Purchase. I'm really high on him. I think he can be a really high NFL draft pick in a couple of years. Even like I feel like Dylan Williams is that type of player as well. So many times I see a good scrape and then filling the hole is sad. Yeah, that happened multiple times today, and like luckily it didn't come back to hurt us. But yeah, the linebackers are doing it better. But yeah, they're not. That's why I think Dylan Williams, when he came in the other game, I think like he was doing that, and like he's that old school, and I think he has the athleticism to do it better. Do you think Dylan Williams deserves more snaps on defense? Like, am I being a little too positive about him? Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I really like Dylan Williams. I wish they would rotate him in more. I'm curious as to why they don't. Just looking at like last year's roster just to see about like linebackers. Because funny enough, while I feel like our secondary wasn't as good as this year, I feel like our linebackers have been better. Like, I love Devin Jackson. He's not an inside linebacker. He's an outside linebacker. I think they use him too much as an inside linebacker. I would love to see. Who am I just talking about? Dylan Williams? Is that who it is? Yeah, I would love to see Dylan Williams be rotated in more inside linebacker and Devin Jackson more in an outside. All right, I think I will have to sign off for the night. This was a lot of fun, and like I said, I will be back to producing consistent content. Oh, next game, what do you want to see? Also glad to see we actually played somewhat better off a bye week. Yes, I agree. That was a big win. Like you said, I think while the game looks close and while they technically didn't cover, I think the Ducks did overall play well. So what do I want to see next game? I want to see healthy. I want this team to be healthy. I'm a little concerned they came off a bye with so many injuries. And I want to see what we've just been talking about with the carryover of the aggression on offense. I don't want to see a regression back to the play calling that we saw against Wisconsin, Indiana. So I want to see some aggression on offense. Keep playing into the strength of the down the field passing attack, and like you said, set it up in what we've been talking about of if you're going to use something as a weapon or you're going to use a strategy, set it up and then stick to it. So I want them to run the ball. I want to see them come mentally prepared, and I don't want to see that look in Dante's eye that he had against Indiana. I want this team to be locked in, ready to play, and play like they did today. Physical, great defensive line play. So run the ball and, continue to see the growth that we saw in defense today with the linebackers playing a little bit better and stopping the run against a Minnesota team that's going to want to do that. So I will log off now. It's been fun. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Zach. I'll be producing more consistent content coming up this week. So look out for most likely doing a stream midweek. So turn on those post notifications, and I hope you guys all have a great week, and I will catch you next time. Thank you so much for watching.